He sat in his corner office high above the city, looking out through the tall glass windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. The city lights blinked like 1,000 little stars, reflecting on the polished marble floors. From up here it looked beautiful, perfect even, but to him it felt empty. The office was quiet, almost too quiet, and he was alone, like he had been every Christmas for the past 10 years. Every year. Without fail, he stayed in the office on Christmas Eve. He had tried, once or twice, to go home or spend the holiday with family, but it never felt right. He had no children, no siblings nearby, and his parents were long gone. The friends he once had families of their own, and invitations to parties never reached him anymore. Over time, he had stopped expecting anything from the world on that day. He told himself it was because of his work, his dedication to the company he built from scratch. The truth, he admitted quietly to himself, was that he was afraid. Afraid of facing the empty spaces in his life. Afraid of being reminded of how alone he really was. The office itself was a testament to his success. Expensive furniture lined the space, soft leather chairs and polished wood desks, all shining under the bright chandelier lights. There was a Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with gold and silver ornaments. It was beautiful, but it had no warmth. No one to admire it with him. He had arranged for it to be delivered, but the florist had left it by the door. There were no presents under it. There never were. He had bought gifts in the past, expensive ones, hoping to feel something. But it always ended the same. Unwrapped boxes and a hollow silence. He picked up the glass of wine on his desk and turned it in his hand, staring at the deep red liquid. It shimmered in the light, but it could not fill the emptiness in his chest. He thought about the past Christmases, the ones with family long ago before life had become so complicated. His memories were blurry, but he remembered laughter, warmth, and the smell of cinnamon and baked cookies. It had been a happy time, but it had slipped away slowly as work and ambition took over. He had told himself that success was all that mattered, that happiness could wait. Now, years later, he wondered if it had ever been enough. The sound of a soft hum from the city below reminded him that life went on outside. People were walking in the streets carrying bags of gifts, laughing and meeting loved ones. He envied them. There was something in their joy that reminded him of a life he had chosen not to live. He had power, money, and influence, but none of that could buy the warmth of someone genuinely caring for him. He had tried briefly with relationships in the past, but it had never worked. Perhaps it was his own fear, or perhaps it was that no one could ever fit into the spaces he had built around himself. The office door opened quietly, startling him for a moment. He looked up, but it was only the cleaning staff finishing their rounds early. He smiled politely, but forced them out quickly, not wanting any reminders of the world outside. The silence returned, deeper this time, as if it could sense his loneliness and had decided to settle in. He sank back into his chair and leaned his head against the cool leather, letting his thoughts drift. He thought about the company. It had grown from a small office with a handful of employees to a massive enterprise with thousands. People respected him, envied him, even admired him. But respect and admiration were not the same as love. They were empty, hollow versions of the connection he craved. He had tried to fill his life with work, to distract himself with meetings, deals, and travel. But Christmas Eve was different. It was a day that exposed the truth. It reminded him that he had no one to sit across from, no one to share a meal with, no one to laugh at the smallest jokes. He was surrounded by success, but not by life. The clock on his desk ticked slowly, each second louder than the last. Midnight was approaching, and with it the symbolic turning of the year. He thought about the past year, the deals made, the profits earned, the awards received. All of it seemed meaningless tonight. Tonight the silence was louder than any applause, and the emptiness sharper than any challenge he had faced in business. He put down his wine glass and got up, walking toward the window. He rested his hands on the glass and looked down at the streets below. There were people in small shops, families carrying boxes and gifts, children laughing. He felt a pang in his chest, a longing he could not quite name. He remembered the last Christmas he had spent with someone he cared about. It had been years ago. There had been laughter, warmth, a fleeting feeling that maybe he could belong somewhere. But it ended abruptly, as if life had pulled him back into the pattern he now lived in. He had retreated into his office ever since, convinced that being alone was safer than risking disappointment again. Yet in the quiet moments like this, he admitted to himself that the safety was not worth the cost. He was lonely. Truly, achingly lonely. A soft breeze from the slightly open window brought a chill into the room, and he shivered. He looked around, noticing the little details he had ignored. The empty coffee cup on the desk, the scattered files, the half-unwrapped gifts on the side table. Everything was perfect, orderly, shiny, but lifeless. It was the same with his life. Everything was in place, but it was missing something fundamental. It was missing connection. Human warmth, something he had forgotten how to seek, something he had forgotten how to let in. He sighed and sank back into his chair, staring at the Christmas tree. He had bought it to fill the void, but it did not. He had decorated it meticulously, choosing ornaments that sparkled, lights that twinkled, ribbons that shimmered. Yet no matter how beautiful it looked, it did not smile back at him, did not hug him, did not laugh. It reminded him that he had built walls around himself so high and thick that even the joy of Christmas could not enter. As the minutes ticked closer to midnight, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Every year he asked himself if this might be the year something different would happen, if someone would appear, if someone would knock on the door, if someone would remind him that he was not alone. But he had stopped expecting it. He had stopped hoping, and yet deep down a tiny part of him still did. He reached for his wine again, but it felt heavier in his hand this time. He looked at it and laughed softly at himself. What was he waiting for? A miracle? A stranger? A sign that life could still surprise him? Perhaps. Perhaps he was simply waiting for someone who could break through the walls he had built, someone who could see the man behind the CEO title. The man who was just as scared, just as lonely, just as human as anyone else. The city outside continued to hum with life. He felt like an observer watching from above, untouched and untouchable. Yet the thought of being untouched no longer comforted him. He wanted warmth. He wanted laughter. He wanted someone to walk through that office door and change everything. He didn't know when or how it would happen, but he felt a strange stir of hope, a small flickering hope that maybe this Christmas, something different could occur. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and let himself imagine. He imagined a knock on the door. He imagined a smile, a warm greeting, the presence of someone who cared. He imagined that for once he did not have to be alone. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope, to imagine, to believe that maybe this Christmas could be different. He didn't know it yet, but outside on the cold streets someone was about to appear, someone carrying nothing expensive, nothing flashy, just something simple, something real. And that simple act would start to change everything he thought he knew about Christmas, about loneliness, about connection, and about the heart he thought had grown cold over the years. He did not hear the footsteps yet, did not see the small shadow approaching the glass doors. He only sat in his office, a man surrounded by success and solitude, waiting unknowingly for a moment that could transform his life. For the first time in a long time, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Something was coming, something unexpected, something human. And for the first time in years, he was not quite alone. She zipped up her worn jacket and pulled the scarf tighter around her neck. The wind was sharp that evening, cutting through the small streets lined with snow-covered cars and twinkling lights. She held her daughter's hand tightly, feeling the warmth of the small chubby fingers that squeezed hers in return. It was Christmas Eve, and while the city was bustling with cheerful crowds, their little apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of an old heater struggling to keep the cold at bay. The mother looked down at her daughter, who was bouncing slightly on her heels, excitement shining in her eyes. She had tried her best to make the day special, even though they didn't have much. There were no big presents, no grand decorations, only a small tree in the corner of their tiny living room. Its branches were thin, the lights flickering weakly, but to the little girl it was perfect. She had helped her mother hang the few ornaments they had, giggling at the crooked positions, insisting they were just right. The mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. She felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride because she had managed, despite everything, to give her child a sense of wonder. Sadness because she wished she could give more. She worked long hours at the diner down the street, her shifts barely covering rent and groceries. There was never much left for gifts, and yet, She always tried to create something memorable. She knew her daughter would remember the feeling of love, not the size of the presents. As they walked through the streets, the little girl pointed at shop windows filled with toys, dolls, and sparkling decorations. Her eyes were wide with awe. The mother nodded, smiling softly, but her heart tightened. She wished she could provide those things, but she didn't want her daughter to feel disappointed. Instead, she took her hand and said, "Do you know what makes Christmas really special?" The girl shook her head, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "It's not the gifts," her mother said quietly. "It's the love we share. It's helping others, making people happy, and being together." The little girl's eyes lit up. "Like giving someone a present?" she asked. "Yes," her mother said, smiling. "Even the smallest gift can mean a lot if it comes from the heart." And that thought had led them here tonight. She had spent the past few days quietly planning something small but meaningful. They didn't have money for expensive presents, but they had something else, something personal. She had made a card herself, folded carefully, decorated with glitter and crayon drawings. Inside was a note, simple words written with love. "Merry Christmas. Wishing you happiness and warmth." Along with the card, she had baked a few cookies, carefully packaged in a tin they could carry. Her daughter was holding the tin proudly, her small face glowing with excitement. "We're going to give it to someone?" she asked, almost whispering as if it were a secret. "Yes," her mother replied, "but it has to be someone who might need a little cheer." The idea had come to her earlier in the week. While walking past the tall office building downtown, she had noticed the lights in the corner office shining late into the night. She knew it belonged to a CEO, a man who everyone said was successful, rich, and respected. But she had also heard rumors that he was always alone during the holidays. No family, no friends. She thought about it. Here she was, worried about how small her gift was, and yet she knew she had something he didn't, someone to share love with. Perhaps, she thought, a little gesture could make a difference. They reached the towering building, its glass doors reflecting the twinkling lights of the city. The mother's heart raced. She wasn't sure if anyone would answer, if she would even be allowed in. But she had made up her mind. She wanted her daughter to understand that kindness was never about money or status. It was about reaching out. They entered the lobby, and the warmth from inside enveloped them. The smell of polished floors, faint coffee, and faint traces of perfume filled the air. It was silent, too silent for a building that housed so many people during the day. The mother's hand tightened around her daughter's, feeling the slight tremble from nerves or excitement. She wasn't sure which. The little girl looked up at the massive Christmas tree in the lobby, decorated with sparkling ornaments and twinkling lights. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," her mother said softly. "But remember, the real magic is what we carry in our hearts." They walked toward the reception desk where a security guard glanced at them curiously. "Can I help you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. The mother smiled nervously. We'd like to deliver something to the CEO. It's a Christmas gift." The guard looked skeptical. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," she admitted. "But it's important, it's from the heart." The guard hesitated, then nodded slowly. Something about her sincerity seemed to disarm him. He picked up the phone, spoke briefly, and then waved them through, saying, "Take the elevator to the top floor. Someone will meet you there." The mother thanked him quietly, holding her daughter's hand tightly. They stepped into the elevator, the numbers lighting up as they ascended. Each floor passed slowly, as if giving them time to gather courage. The little girl fidgeted slightly, clutching the tin of cookies. "Do you think he'll like it, Mommy?" she asked. Her mother smiled. "I think he will. It's the thought that counts. And you know what? Sometimes people who look like they have everything need a little reminder that someone cares." The elevator dinged, and they stepped out onto the top floor. The corridor was long and quiet, lit by soft wall lamps. They approached the office door, the one with the brass nameplate gleaming faintly. The mother took a deep breath, then knocked softly. Inside, the CEO was sitting in his chair, staring at the Christmas tree he had arranged. He had been lost in thought, feeling the weight of another lonely holiday. The knock startled him, echoing in the quiet office. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the idea of visitors had not crossed his mind. He stood slowly, walking to the door. When he opened it, he saw a woman and a little girl bundled in coats, holding a tin and a small card. Their faces were flushed from the cold and their eyes were bright with nervous excitement. "Merry Christmas," the mother said softly, holding out the card. We thought you might like this." The CEO blinked, taken aback. He wasn't used to people showing up at his door, and certainly not with gifts. He looked at the little girl who was watching him expectantly. She offered the tin of cookies, holding it out with both hands. "For you," she said, her voice small but firm. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. His mind raced, filled with years of habits, walls, and solitude. He had spent so many Christmases alone, he wasn't sure how to respond. But there was something in their eyes, something genuine, something that bypassed all the walls he had built. The mother stepped forward slightly. "We don't have much," she said quietly, "but we wanted to share a little Christmas cheer. Sometimes, a small gesture can make a big difference." The CEO felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't realized how empty he had felt until now, how much he had been craving connection. He looked at the little girl's hopeful face, at the sincerity in the mother's eyes, and something inside him shifted. The polished walls of his office, the shiny gifts, the luxury, it all seemed distant and unimportant. What mattered was this small act of kindness. He smiled, the first genuine smile in years, and stepped aside. "Come in," he said softly, his voice a little unsteady. "Come in, thank you. For this." The mother and daughter entered, feeling a warmth that went beyond the office lights. They set the tin of cookies on the desk, and the mother placed the card beside it. The little girl's face lit up with a shy grin. They all stood there for a moment, the silence different now, filled with possibility, filled with a new kind of connection. The CEO realized that this small act, this unexpected visit, was the beginning of something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for. It was the start of a Christmas he would never forget, a reminder that even the loneliest hearts could be reached with a little courage and genuine kindness. He gestured toward the chairs near the tree. "Please sit, I'd like to share this moment with you." The mother and daughter sat a little cautiously, but the warmth of the office, the presence of someone who finally welcomed them, made them relax. They shared a few cookies, laughed at small stories, and for the first time that evening, the CEO felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. The walls around his heart were cracking, just enough to let a little joy in. Outside, the city continued to bustle, unaware of the quiet miracle unfolding in the top-floor office. Inside, the three of them shared a simple Christmas Eve together, a moment that would linger in memory far longer than any gift or decoration ever could. And that night, the mother and daughter left, their hearts full, carrying with them the knowledge that kindness, courage, and a simple gesture could reach even the loneliest of souls. The CEO watched them go, feeling a warmth that was new and unexpected. He had been waiting alone for so many Christmases, but now, he realized, sometimes it only takes one small act of human connection to change everything. The CEO closed the door behind them, feeling the quiet of the office change. It was no longer a cold, silent space. The air seemed lighter, filled with something he hadn't felt in years, anticipation, warmth, and curiosity. He watched as the little girl carefully set the tin of cookies on the desk and peeked inside. Her eyes sparkled as she examined the contents. "They're chocolate chip," she said proudly. "My favorite. And I made sure they're soft." The mother smiled softly. "We wanted to share a little happiness," she said. "Even small things can mean a lot." The CEO felt his chest tighten. He had built walls around himself for so long, thinking that independence and success were enough. But looking at them now, seeing their effort, their thoughtfulness, he realized how lonely he had allowed himself to be. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice softer than usual. "Thank you," he said. "Truly, it's unexpected but appreciated more than you can imagine." The little girl tilted her head, studying him curiously. "Are you usually alone on Christmas?" she asked quietly. He blinked, surprised by her honesty. He wasn't used to anyone asking questions that pierced so directly into his life. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he admitted. "I've spent many Christmases here in this office, alone." Her eyes widened, and she looked up at her mother. The mother placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's shoulder, and the girl turned back to him. "That's sad," she said softly, almost a statement, almost a question. He smiled faintly, touched by her innocence. "It is," he admitted, "but I've gotten used to it. I thought it was just how life was for me." The mother leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. "Sometimes life feels that way," she said. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Even a small gesture, a visit, a kind word can make a difference. The CEO nodded, looking down at the card they had brought. He picked it up carefully, noticing the uneven handwriting, the crayon drawings, the glitter stuck to the edges. He felt a lump in his throat. The card wasn't fancy or expensive. It didn't need to be. Its value was in its sincerity, in the courage it took for them to come here, in the love that had gone into every detail. He opened the card slowly, reading the simple words aloud, in a voice that trembled slightly. "Merry Christmas. Wishing you happiness and warmth." He looked up at them. I don't think I've received something like this in years. Maybe ever." The mother smiled, her eyes soft. "It's never too late to receive happiness," she said. "And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places." The little girl nodded eagerly. "See, Mommy? I told you! It's magic." The CEO chuckled softly, a sound that had been absent from his life for far too long. He motioned toward the chairs near the Christmas tree. "Please," he said, "sit with me. Let's enjoy this moment together." They hesitated for a moment, then moved toward the chairs. The little girl sat on her mother's lap, holding the tin of cookies carefully. The CEO sat across from them, feeling oddly nervous. He wasn't used to being vulnerable, to letting strangers or anyone see the cracks in his carefully constructed life. Yet there was something about them that made it easier. Something about their warmth, their simplicity, their honesty. They began to talk quietly, the conversation gentle at first. The mother told stories about her daughter's school, about small joys and challenges, about how they had spent the past few days preparing for Christmas. The little girl piped in with laughter, describing her favorite holiday memories, the songs she loved, the smells of cookies and candles. The CEO listened, smiling, sometimes laughing softly at her enthusiasm. He shared a few stories too, carefully chosen from his past. He told them about his early years, starting the company from scratch, the long nights, the challenges, the triumphs. He spoke honestly about the sacrifices he had made, the relationships he had lost, and the loneliness he had come to accept. The mother listened intently, not judging, only understanding. She nodded occasionally, offering gentle comments, asking questions that encouraged him to open up. The little girl's eyes never left him, absorbing every word, but always ready to bring the conversation back to laughter and lightness. As they shared stories, the office began to feel less like a place of isolation and more like a home. The CEO noticed the way the little girl's laughter filled the corners of the room, the warmth in the mother's eyes as she spoke, the simple act of kindness that had brought them here. He felt a shift inside himself, a realization that he had been wrong to think that success alone could bring fulfillment. Human connection mattered far more than wealth, power, or accolades. At one point, the little girl asked shyly, "Do you ever get lonely?" The CEO paused, caught off guard by the directness. He looked at her, his eyes softening. "Yes," he admitted. "More than I like to admit. I thought I had gotten used to it, but it doesn't go away." "Not really." The little girl nodded thoughtfully. "That's why we came," she said simply. "To share some happiness. So you're not alone tonight." The CEO's chest tightened. He had never expected to feel gratitude, warmth, and humility all at once. It was overwhelming, yet comforting. I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Thank you for coming, for this. It means more than you know." The mother reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Sometimes all it takes is one small act to remind someone that they're not forgotten," she said softly. "You're not alone, even if it feels that way. There are people who care, even strangers." He looked at them, seeing the truth in their eyes. It was simple, honest, and real, something he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. He felt a tear welling up, quickly brushed away, but he didn't bother hiding the small smile that had formed. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, acknowledged, and connected. The little girl climbed down from her mother's lap and placed a cookie on the desk. "Try it," she said eagerly. "It's yummy." He hesitated, then took it, breaking off a small piece. The sweetness, the thought behind it, and the innocence of the gesture struck him deeply. He chewed slowly, savoring not just the flavor but the moment itself. He realized that life's most meaningful experiences weren't the grand gestures, the expensive gifts, or the accolades. They were these small, sincere acts that came from the heart. They continued talking, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflections. The mother asked about his childhood, his memories of family, and the CEO responded with honesty, recounting both joy and regret. The little girl asked endless questions, some simple, some profound, all of them carrying the pure curiosity and honesty that only a child could possess. Time passed unnoticed. Outside, the city's lights twinkled. Cars moved along icy streets, and people celebrated in homes and restaurants. Inside the office, the three of them were creating a different kind of celebration, one that didn't rely on extravagance or wealth, only on connection, warmth, and shared presence. The CEO realized something important. He had spent so long building walls, convincing himself that he didn't need anyone. But in this moment, he understood that life's true wealth was not in money or status. It was in the bonds we form, in the kindness we give and receive, in the courage to reach out and let others in. He looked at the mother and daughter, feeling a sense of gratitude and hope he hadn't known in years. He didn't need a fancy party, expensive gifts, or recognition. He needed people who cared, people he could care for in return. And here they were, two strangers who had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten, the simple joy of human connection. The little girl suddenly tugged at his sleeve. "Can we sing a song?" she asked shyly. He blinked, surprised, then smiled. "Of course," he said. They sang softly, the mother's voice gentle, the daughter's voice high and clear, and the CEO humming along, unsure but willing. The sound filled the office, mingling with the faint scent of cookies and the soft glow of the Christmas tree. It was imperfect, unpolished, but it was real, and that made it perfect. When the song ended, the little girl clapped her hands excitedly. "See, Mommy, I told you it would be magic." The CEO laughed quietly, a sound that felt strange and wonderful to him. "Yes," he said softly, "it really is magic. You've reminded me of something I had almost forgotten." The mother nodded, smiling. "Sometimes it takes a small act of kindness to remind us of what truly matters," she said. The CEO leaned back in his chair, looking at them both. He felt lighter than he had in years, as if a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. He understood now that Christmas wasn't about grandeur or tradition or money. It was about love, connection, and the courage to open one's heart. The little girl climbed back onto her mother's lap, and they sat together quietly for a moment. The CEO watched them, feeling a deep sense of peace. He knew that this night would stay with him forever, not because of gifts, or decorations or wealth, but because of the small, sincere act that had bridged the gap between loneliness and connection. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone, and as the clock ticked closer to midnight, he realized something important. Life could surprise him. People could surprise him, and sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest power. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how long this connection would last, but tonight, for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope, warmth, and the simple joy of being seen. And that night, in that office high above the city, something extraordinary happened. A lonely CEO, a determined mother, and her curious daughter shared a moment that would change all of their lives forever. The CEO leaned back in his chair, the quiet of the office now feeling warm instead of empty. He looked at the mother and daughter, both smiling softly, their presence filling the room in a way he hadn't realized was possible. He had spent so many years hiding behind walls of success, of pride, of fear, and yet here they were, two people who had crossed them without hesitation. They didn't care about his wealth, his status, or his accomplishments. They only cared about him as a human being. For a long moment he simply watched them. The little girl's eyes sparkled as she talked about school, her laughter bright and contagious. The mother's voice was calm, patient, and filled with warmth as she encouraged her daughter to share stories. The CEO realized he hadn't felt such ease in years. Conversations had always been transactional in his world, about deals, numbers, profit margins, but this was different. This was real. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I haven't done this in a long time," he admitted. "I haven't." "Let people in." The mother looked at him kindly. "It's never too late," she said. "Sometimes the hardest part is letting someone see who you really are." He nodded slowly, thinking about the walls he had built. For so long he had believed that loneliness was safer than vulnerability. He had believed that independence was enough, that love and connection were luxuries he could not afford. But now, watching them, Hearing the joy in the little girl's voice, he realized how empty that belief had been. The little girl suddenly climbed down from her mother's lap and approached him cautiously. "Can I sit with you?" she asked shyly. "Of course," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. She climbed up and settled beside him, her small hand brushing his. It was a simple touch, but it carried a warmth that made him realize how much he had been missing. He glanced at her mother, who smiled, understanding the silent conversation that passed between them. "Thank you for letting us in," the mother said quietly. "I know this isn't easy for you." The CEO shook his head. "It's not," he admitted, "but it feels right. Being with you both. It feels alive, like I've been missing something for years and now I can almost reach it." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes wide. "What did you miss?" she asked innocently. He paused, unsure how to answer. Words were not easy for him in these moments, but he knew he owed honesty. "Connection," he said finally. "Laughter, stories, people who care about you. I've had success, yes, but I've been alone too long. I didn't realize what I was missing until now." The mother nodded. "That's all any of us need," she said softly. "Someone to notice us, someone to care. It doesn't have to be grand, just real." The CEO felt a lump in his throat. He had spent years chasing recognition, prestige, and wealth, believing it would fill the empty spaces inside him. Now sitting with them, he realized how wrong he had been. The simplest gestures, the sharing of cookies, the offering of a handmade card, the bravery to knock on a door, had done more to reach his heart than all his accomplishments combined. He looked around the office, suddenly seeing it differently. The polished floors, the expensive furniture, the shiny decorations, they were all symbols of success, but they lacked life. They lacked warmth. What brought warmth now was not material wealth, but the presence of people who cared. "I don't know if I've ever felt this way before," he said softly. "I thought I could live without this. Without people to share moments with. But now I see how wrong I was." The mother reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said gently. "Acknowledging it is the first step. And now you can choose differently. You can invite people in. You can let yourself feel." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek despite his effort to hold it back. "I want to," he whispered. "I don't want to be alone like this anymore." The little girl's eyes lit up. "Yay, you'll be happy then," she exclaimed. Her laughter rang out, pure and unrestrained, and the CEO couldn't help but join in. It was a sound he hadn't made in years, unburdened by meetings, deals, or responsibilities. Just laughter, simple and honest. They shared the cookies, sipping a warm drink the CEO had prepared at the small coffee station. The mother told stories of past Christmases, of small traditions and memories she and her daughter had created despite challenges. The CEO listened, absorbing not just the words but the spirit behind them. He felt a connection he hadn't thought possible in his own world of rules and expectations. At one point, the little girl asked if they could decorate another small tree she had brought with them. It was a tiny artificial tree she had saved from home, adorned with handmade ornaments she had carefully crafted. The CEO smiled and agreed, sitting down to help. As they hung ornaments together, he realized how much he had missed participating in simple, joyful acts. He had spent so long focusing on work, on results, on appearances, that he had forgotten how much happiness could be found in small, shared experiences. They laughed as the little girl insisted certain ornaments go on the left because it's lucky, and he found himself following her, instructions with a seriousness he hadn't known he possessed. The mother watched quietly, her eyes soft, noting the change in him. He was opening up, letting go of the rigidity that had defined him for years, embracing something raw and human instead. After a while, they sat back, admiring the small tree beside the larger one. The office now glowed differently, not just from the lights and decorations, but from the energy they had brought into it. The CEO felt a sense of peace, a realization that Christmas and life did not have to be lonely. It was about connection, about courage, about allowing others in even when it felt vulnerable. "I've never had anyone come to me like this," he admitted softly. "I've never been cared for without conditions. I don't know how to repay it." The mother shook her head gently. "You don't have to," she said. "This wasn't about repayment. It's about sharing. You can start by letting yourself feel it, letting it change you." He looked at them both, feeling a wave of gratitude and humility. For years he had thought happiness was measured in numbers, in deals, in success. Now he understood that it was measured in moments like this, in laughter shared, kindness given, hearts opened. The little girl leaned against him, her small head resting lightly on his shoulder. "I like being here," she said softly. "It feels happy." He smiled, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spread through him. "So do I," he said. "So do I." The mother glanced at him, her eyes meeting his with quiet understanding. "Sometimes," she said, "all it takes is a moment of courage. Yours was letting us in. Ours was knocking on the door. Together we made this Christmas different." The CEO nodded, feeling a lightness he hadn't known in years. The weight of loneliness that had pressed on him for so long was beginning to lift. He realized that he could choose to live differently, to invite connection instead of fearing it, to embrace love instead of shutting it out. They continued talking, sharing small stories, memories, and dreams. The office had transformed from a place of cold solitude into a space of warmth, laughter, and hope. The CEO felt a shift inside him, a realization that life's true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the relationships we build, the kindness we share, and the courage to open our hearts. As the evening wore on, he found himself genuinely smiling, laughing, and even joking along with them. The little girl's energy was contagious, and the mother's calm wisdom anchored the moment. He had been waiting for someone to break through his walls, and now he understood that they had done more than that. They had shown him the path back to joy, to connection, and to life itself. When the mother and daughter eventually prepared to leave, he felt a strange mix of sadness and gratitude. He didn't want the night to end, yet he knew this was only the beginning. They had shown him that it was possible to let others in, to embrace happiness, and to find warmth in unexpected places. "Thank you," he said quietly, standing with them at the door, "for everything. You've reminded me what Christmas truly is." The mother smiled softly. "That's all we hoped for," she said. "Remember, it's never too late to start new traditions, to open your heart." The little girl waved cheerfully. "See you next Christmas?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. The CEO laughed softly, a sound that was light and free. "Yes," he said. "Next Christmas we'll celebrate together." As they walked away, the office felt different. The walls no longer seemed so high, the silence no longer so heavy. He had been alone for so many years, but that night, something fundamental had changed. The small acts of kindness, the courage to reach out, and the willingness to accept love had begun a transformation he hadn't thought possible. For the first time in a long time, he felt that Christmas, this moment, was truly alive. The next morning, the CEO woke up earlier than usual. His office, once a place of cold routine, now felt warmer somehow. He looked around at the small Christmas tree he had decorated with the mother and her daughter, its light still twinkling softly in the early sun. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of anticipation, of possibility, rather than the hollow emptiness he had grown used to. He thought about the night before, how courage and kindness had entered his life unexpectedly. He remembered the little girl's laughter, her mother's calm presence, the genuine warmth that had filled the office. He realized that something inside him had shifted. He wanted to continue this feeling, to embrace it, to make it a part of his life. He knew that this was the beginning of something new, a tradition that went beyond the usual trappings of wealth or routine. He wanted to open his heart further, to invite connection, and to make sure that no Christmas would ever be spent in loneliness again. By late morning, he was already preparing. He arranged a small table near the tree, placing cookies, hot chocolate, and a few extra decorations he had bought quietly the night before. He wanted the space to feel welcoming, warm, and alive. For once, it wasn't about impressing anyone or showing off success. It was about comfort, joy, and shared presence. The phone rang and he picked it up, hoping to reach the mother and daughter. He felt a little nervous, wondering if they would come again, but also hopeful. "Hello?" he said. "Good morning," the mother's voice said cheerfully. "We were hoping we could come by again." "Is that okay?" "Yes," he said immediately. "Please come, I'd like that very much." When they arrived, the little girl ran into the office, her excitement contagious. She hugged him briefly, then turned to decorate the small tree they had brought. The mother followed, smiling softly, observing the care he had taken to make the office feel welcoming. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "It feels alive." He nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "It's because of you," he said. "You reminded me what this holiday is really about." The morning passed with simple joy. They shared cookies, poured hot chocolate, and told stories. The little girl described how she had hung ornaments at home, how she had helped her mother wrap presents, and how excited she was for the holiday. The CEO listened, genuinely engaged, asking questions, laughing at her observations, and noticing for the first time how small gestures could carry so much meaning. At one point, the little girl tugged at his sleeve. "Can we do something special?" she asked. "Of course," he replied. "What do you have in mind?" She thought for a moment, then said, "Let's give something to people who might be lonely like you used to be." Her words struck him. He had been so focused on his own loneliness that he hadn't considered others who might be in the same situation. He looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly, and realized this was the perfect opportunity to extend the kindness he had received. Together, they prepared small packages, cookies, handmade cards, warm scarves, and notes of encouragement. The CEO had employees quietly assist, bringing the packages to nearby neighbors, senior citizens, and others who might not have anyone to celebrate with. The office buzzed with a quiet sense of purpose, different from the usual hum of work and deadlines. This was real, tangible, and deeply satisfying. As they delivered the packages, the CEO observed the reactions of those receiving them. Smiles, tears, and expressions of gratitude filled the air. He saw firsthand how small gestures could transform someone's day, even their perspective. The mother and daughter's presence amplified the impact, their energy infectious, their sincerity undeniable. By evening, they returned to the office, tired but exhilarated. The small Christmas tree glowed warmly, and the CEO looked at the mother and daughter with a sense of deep appreciation. "I've never done anything like this before," he said softly. "And now I can't imagine spending Christmas any other way." The mother smiled. "Sometimes all it takes is one step to start something bigger. You've shown courage by letting us in. Now we can spread joy together." The little girl leaned against him, her eyes sparkling. "This is the best Christmas ever," she exclaimed. The CEO laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. He realized that happiness wasn't something to be bought or earned. It was something shared, something nurtured, something created through connection. That night, they all sat together by the small tree, sharing cookies, hot chocolate, and quiet conversation. The CEO felt a profound sense of peace, the kind that comes from knowing you are part of something meaningful. He had spent so many Christmases alone, but now, he understood that loneliness could be broken, sometimes by the simplest gestures, sometimes by the smallest acts of courage. As the evening drew on, he found himself thinking ahead. He wanted this to become a tradition, not for appearances, not for recognition, but for the joy of connection. He envisioned future Christmases spent with the mother and daughter, sharing moments, laughter, and stories. He wanted to continue spreading kindness, to reach out to others who might be lonely, to create a ripple effect of warmth and generosity. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them grew stronger. The CEO began opening his office doors during holidays, inviting not just the mother and daughter, but others who might need companionship. He organized small gatherings, simple celebrations, and opportunities to share joy with those often overlooked. His employees noticed the change in him, a shift from distant authority to approachable, compassionate leader. The mother and daughter became regular visitors, each Christmas and sometimes throughout the year. Their presence reminded him of the power of kindness, the importance of shared moments, and the beauty of unexpected connections. They laughed together, cooked together, and sometimes just sat in quiet companionship. The office, once a symbol of isolation, had transformed into a place of warmth, life, and human connection. One Christmas, a year after their first meeting, the CEO watched the mother and daughter decorate the office tree. The little girl hung an ornament carefully, then stepped back to admire her work. "It's perfect," she said proudly. "Yes," he agreed, smiling. "It really is." The mother looked at him, her eyes soft and grateful. "You've changed so much in a year," she said. "You've let love in, and it shows." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "You showed me how," he said. "I thought I could live without this, but now I know I can't. Christmas and life are about sharing, about connection, about being present." The little girl ran over and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for letting us in," she exclaimed. He hugged her back, feeling warmth he had never known before. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for coming into my life." From that year on, it became a tradition. Each Christmas, the CEO, the mother, and her daughter celebrated together. They invited others, shared stories, gave small gifts, and reached out to those who might otherwise be alone. The office became a place of joy, not wealth. A place where human connection mattered more than anything else. The CEO found that his heart had opened in ways he hadn't thought possible. He realized that success and achievements were meaningless without people to share them with. He had spent so long alone, believing that he could be happy on his own. But now he understood that the greatest happiness comes from giving, from caring, and from allowing others to care for you in return. Years passed, but the tradition never faded. Each Christmas, the trio, sometimes joined by others they had helped along the way, gathered in the office sharing warmth, laughter, and simple joys. The little girl grew older, but her spirit remained bright, reminding him each year of the courage and kindness that had first reached him. He looked back on his life with gratitude, not for the wealth he had accumulated, not for the awards or recognition, but for the moment when a single mother and her daughter had knocked on his door and changed everything. They had reminded him that it was never too late to open your heart, to embrace love, and to create a life filled with connection and meaning. And every Christmas after that, he waited no longer in loneliness. He celebrated with those who mattered, those who brought warmth into his life. He had discovered the true magic of the holiday, a magic not bought with money, not earned with success, but built through courage, kindness, and human connection. On those nights, as the lights of the city twinkled below, he would look at the mother and daughter now like family and smile. The office no longer felt like a lonely fortress. It was a home, a place of laughter, stories, and shared moments. And he knew, without doubt, that this was what Christmas and life was truly about: love, presence, and the courage to let others in. No longer alone, he had finally found what he had been missing all those years: the warmth of human connection, the joy of giving, and the peace that comes from knowing that even the smallest acts of kindness can change a life forever. And every year, as the snow fell softly outside and the lights glimmered inside, the CEO, the mother, and her daughter celebrated together, hearts full, laughter abundant, and a new tradition born that would last for the rest of their lives.